Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm going to give this a few minutes, or moments, not minutes. I'm going to give this a few moments to just kind of settle into this space, giving me a moment to settle into this space. And if there's anybody that joins me live, giving them a moment to get the notification and join as well, since I didn't announce that I would be doing this live right now. So, for those of you watching this on replay, please bear with me. It's been a little while since I've connected with you live. So I had a little bit of time, so I thought I would come in and connect with you. I've missed connecting with you. So just wanted to come in and create a space to spend a few moments for yourself, being mindful, connecting to yourself and your breath. Hello. Welcome, Lisa. So just a moment to give yourself some space to be and to connect within yourself and with us. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here, whether you're live or watching on replay. So, how are you? How are you really? Give yourself a moment and just, if you can, close your eyes. Notice what's happening in your body and just really let yourself sit with the idea of, how am I really? Because your first inclination may not be connecting to what is really true for you. Or there may be a lot of nuanced aspects to it. So giving yourself a moment to just connect within yourself and ask, how am I doing? Noticing what comes up. Even if you've got a lot of things going on, a lot of responsibilities, a lot of things that you're trying to manage, all in the previous few minutes before you hopped on here, give yourself this time for it to be just for you. You can get back to whatever you need to get back to. Whatever you're doing, we're doing, will likely be able to wait a few minutes. So see if you can just give yourself this time to just be. So, when you ask yourself, how am I really? How am I doing? If there's anything that is feeling stressed, uneasy, scared, sad, lonely, or maybe you're feeling kind of excited about something you're looking forward to, something you're still feeling the enjoyment of that you did earlier today, that's great. Feel that, reconnect with that. So whatever you're feeling, wherever you're at, is perfectly okay. So whether you tend to fall on the side of maybe struggling a little bit, or if you are on the side of feeling pretty good, taking this time to just allow yourself to be and connect within is good. So taking, just noticing your breath, and if you're not breathing well or fully, just try to deepen your breath a little bit. Just make sure that you are getting all the oxygen that your body needs. Making sure that you're filling your lungs so that they can expand. They need that practice to expand and contract and expand and contract so that they can continue to breathe fully or move fully, experience and take in all of that air. And just notice what comes up for you. Just notice where you're at, where your thoughts go. Let yourself feel whatever is there without judgment, without having the need to feel that you have to change it. Just notice what is there. And if it's a difficult feeling or emotion or memory, know that in this moment you are not alone. Know that whatever that is, however strong it may feel, you will get through it. And so much of what you might be experiencing in terms of feelings and fears are things that many of us are also experiencing. And while, of course, we don't want anybody to be struggling, the reality is that we do. And knowing that we're not alone really can help, as long as you can accept that reality without feeling selfish, without feeling guilty, without harsh judgment that you shouldn't be struggling. Because if any of those are present, it just makes it worse. Which is why taking the time and doing the practice of being really mindful and accepting of wherever you're at is so important. Because if you can just be with it in the moment, then you can't really be focused on any of those other pieces, the feeling selfish or the fear, the judgment. Your mind might go there, but then you can come back to just noticing what is present. And it's a feeling. It's an experience in this moment. And while it may feel strong, and while it may stick around for a while, it is not permanent. Even if it comes from something really, really difficult, challenging, or even traumatic. It ebbs and flows. I'm not saying it's going to go away, especially not if it's something you've been struggling with for a long time. But you know from experience that the feelings, the experiences in your body, there's ebb and flow to it. It gets better, and then it returns, and then it gets better, and it returns. And taking this time to connect within and with us, the more that you can practice that, the more space tends to be created for the ebb, for the times when it doesn't feel quite so strong or intense. When maybe there's a little less judgment, a little less guilt, a little less fear. And knowing that whatever you're feeling, whatever you're afraid of, whatever you're looking forward to, that it's okay. It's okay. There's a lot going on around us. There's a lot going on around us. 2020 seemed to start with a lot going on in my life anyway, and quickly turned into a lot that was going on for all of us. And unfortunately has just continued into bringing even more that we are dealing with, whether it's very intentionally or just energetically, even if we're trying to avoid it. We can't avoid the energy of all that is happening around us. And it takes a toll. And the more avoidant you are, the more in denial you try to be about that reality, the more impact it ultimately ends up having. So taking time to acknowledge and honor the reality of where you're at any given time is really important, because the more you try to deny or avoid or minimize, the more impact it ends up having. It still affects you, even if you're not consciously aware of it. It shows up in other ways, either in ways that are harming you or possibly harming other people. So being able to feel what you feel when you're feeling it goes a long way in being able to really dissipate some of that intensity of feeling that is there. It doesn't make anything go away that you're dealing with, not on its own anyway, but it can really help dissipate some of that feeling, that energy that is behind it. So taking these moments together to honor where you're at and what you're feeling really is important. So see if you can maybe notice where you're feeling any tension in your body, any pain. Are you clenching your jaw? Are your shoulders feeling really tight and up in your ears? That's one of the most common things that people do. Are your hands clenched? Are you making fists? Wherever you're feeling the tension, the unease, as you inhale, again, don't force it, but just as you inhale, let that fuel move into those spaces to oxygenate and to heal, to give awareness and validation into those spaces within your body that have been holding on to the feelings, the stress that maybe you've been trying to avoid, because it does show up in our body. So just let yourself breathe into those spaces. You can practice this exercise anytime, anywhere. Maybe even if your eyes are closed, maybe even imagining as you inhale and send the air, the oxygen to those spaces. Maybe even imagine a bright, warm light penetrating that tension, breaking it up. And as you exhale, it leaves your body. You release it with your breath, allowing a bit of ease into those spaces. Just take a couple more breaths, allowing yourself to fuel, to energize, to calm any of those spaces. And maybe with your last intentional exhalation, maybe you even let that air out with a sigh through your mouth, letting any of that built up energy go. Feeling it release and leave your body. I hope that just giving yourself the space to let go of whatever was going on before you came in here. That maybe that helped a little bit. If you were able to practice the connecting within, the breathing, I hope that that helped you even just oxygenate your blood a little bit more, because most of us do not breathe very sufficiently enough to survive, obviously, but not in a way that really fuels our body in the way that we could. So thank you for joining me for this mindful moment. Practice this. You can do it several times throughout a day. It's really just about staying connected to yourself without judgment. That's the most important thing, just that when you connect internally with your emotions, your thoughts, your body, just being able to acknowledge what's there, what needs aren't being met, from a place of openness and compassion, no judgment. No judgment. Well, hello, everybody. Noticing I don't breathe deeply enough. Yes, that is really such a huge issue, I think, for most people. And I've shared this before, but I find myself, because I've been practicing it a long time, I find myself now still not breathing fully and deeply all the time, but I'll notice that suddenly I take a deep breath, and I will often sigh afterwards. And I do that kind of automatically now. My body is accustomed to that practice. And so if I'm not breathing very well, or even if I'm just kind of feeling maybe some tension or some stress, that I will actually take a deep breath without noticing it. What I notice typically is the sigh. And sometimes I don't even recognize the sigh, but my husband will ask me what's wrong, assuming that because I'm sighing, there's something wrong. So really, the more that we practice, the more natural and automatic it becomes. And that's why it is such an important thing to be able to practice. So much fear lately. Yeah. I think there's just really in the collective energy that is around us globally, but certainly in the last month or so in the US, there is a lot of pain energy. And that pain can look a lot of different ways, but there is a lot of pain and fear energy around. And when we are kind of surrounded by or immersed in that collective energy, it does have an impact on us, whether we're conscious of it or not, whether we're consciously involved in anything in particular or not. It has an impact. And anybody who's watching this has probably heard me talk about vulnerability and how everything can make us vulnerable. And the more vulnerable we are, the more things impact us that normally wouldn't necessarily impact us. And so when we think about everything that's been going on, not to mention what was going on in your life before COVID, there are certainly several layers of difficulty that we are dealing with. The financial aspect, the isolation aspect, the fear of contracting a deadly virus, potentially deadly virus, because we don't know how we're going to be affected by it until we actually have it. There's a lot, there are tons of layers right now of vulnerability. So many different layers, and some people maybe have more than others, but just again, collectively, globally, in our communities, there are so many layers of vulnerability that we are experiencing. And with every layer of vulnerability, it's having a more significant impact on you. It compounds. It's not just this is a layer, this is a layer, this is a layer. I refer to it specifically as layers because each additional layer adds weight, adds vulnerability, stress to these original layers. So everything that is creating stress or difficulty compounds all of the other vulnerability that's already there. So we really are, we already were prior to the previous month, but certainly it seems that it's just ongoing, and each month even that this goes on is adding more. So, and in the US, we have an election coming up, which is also adding a lot of stress for people as well. And so there are a lot of different pieces going on. So if you're not feeling a little stress, if you're not feeling a little uncertain, and if that uncertainty isn't creating a little stress, it may very well be that you are in a serious form of denial. It's possible that maybe you're not. I think it's unlikely, though. So we're all feeling this to an extent. And it really is so incredibly important that we really acknowledge and honor that. Being in denial can be a very important way of coping, particularly as children. In our adult lives, denial doesn't typically serve us very well at all. And in some certain circumstances, it can actually create even more difficulty. So denial is not something to be ashamed of, not something to feel badly about, but being in denial does not actually help. Even in this particular moment, it doesn't really help because it's putting it to the side, but it builds energy as it's to the side. And if we can acknowledge that it's there, it may be difficult, it may not feel good, but if we can acknowledge it there, in that acknowledgement, in taking moments like this, in sharing what you're struggling with, in connecting with other people who get it, you are processing, you are metabolizing, you're dispersing that energy. But we have to first be able to acknowledge it. We can't be in denial about it. You cannot heal what you deny is wounded. So we have to be able to really connect within and acknowledge. Doesn't mean you have to, like, people have a fear that you're going to get stuck in that or you're going to be consumed by it. That really only happens if you try to shut it down and don't do anything about it. But if you're talking about it, particularly if you're somebody that can be supportive of it, that is capable of hearing it, that gets it, if you are not beating yourself up because you're feeling it, if you're not getting caught up in a fear of what it might mean, and you do that by talking about it, then you are kind of metabolizing it so that it's not building and building and building. Like if you think of medication, so metabolizing, right? So if you think of a medication, if your body is not able to metabolize that medication, it builds up, right? And it can cause toxicity and potentially death, which is why they do blood work for a lot of different kinds of medications, because they need to be sure that you are metabolizing that in the way that it's supposed to be metabolized so that it works in the way it's supposed to work and doesn't create problems. Well, our experiences, our emotions, our feelings need to be, our pain actually needs to be metabolized in that way as well. And so I say process, and that's part of it. But it's really about moving some of that through. So these moments where you connect with it, connecting within, and being able to feel the truth of not being alone in whatever is there is really important, because then you're not trying to hold it all on your own, which is what we often tend to do. Hi, everybody. Hi, Julia. Wake up with all that tension and fear. Yes, actually doing deep breathing, taking a few moments first thing in the morning before you maybe even before you fully open your eyes, but certainly before you get out of bed, taking a few intentional breaths can actually make a pretty big difference. Now, obviously, it depends in part on what's going on in your day or in your life, but the more you practice it, the more impact it has. Starting your day by very mindfully just breathing, making sure that you're breathing fully. Ending your day by very consciously taking a few full breaths all the way down deep into your belly and all the way down into the tips of your toes actually can make a difference too. And again, the more you practice, the more impact it has. Yes. Hi, Jess. I can see you. Hello. Okay. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of my community. I truly do appreciate you being here and being willing to not just live your life in denial. Because I know that if you watch my videos or you see my posts or you're commenting and interacting, you're not in denial. And it takes a lot of strength. It takes courage to not be in denial. So I hope that you can feel like, let yourself really honor that reality. And your willingness to show up and not be in denial is what ultimately changes not only your life, but it changes the people around us. You know, we could talk about how, not just in the US, it is happening somewhat globally, but we can talk about how many of us, especially white people, have been in denial about race and the impact that it has on, or racism, and the impact that it has on Black people in this country. And you can go on about your life. But we are kind of recognizing, most of us are recognizing that this is a time for much bigger conversations. And while those conversations are difficult, they're needed, they're long, long, long overdue. And it is only through these conversations, whatever form that takes out or kind of takes up, or takes on, they're difficult. They're not easy. But by having the conversations, by bringing it up into the forefront, that's how things change. And so in our own lives, if we are in denial, those things are going to stay present. They might even continue to happen. And we have more that we have to try to deal with. Once we can start acknowledging it, talking about it, we can begin to make change. So your willingness to be here with me, your willingness to share, your willingness to no longer be in denial, even if it feels like you are in denial much of the time, the fact that you're here with me shows that you are open and willing to no longer use denial as your primary way of coping. And that's something to feel really proud of. It truly is. There are a whole lot of people right now in denial about a lot of things. And it actually further perpetuates the pain that we are experiencing collectively, because they need to stay in denial. So feel good about that. Feel really good about that. You're definitely not alone. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Please take care of yourself. Practice lots of self-compassion. Remember, no judgment. The judgment that you have for yourself does absolutely no good. It really does not serve a helpful purpose at all. But if you come from a place of self-compassion, not excusing. So if there's something you feel badly about, it's not about excusing. There's a huge difference between just excusing something versus having self-compassion for yourself. Like if you're feeling really stressed out and somebody reached out to you and you didn't respond. If you judge yourself, if you beat yourself up about that, you feel guilty, you feel ashamed, you feel like you're a horrible person, that's not going to help. It's not going to help you feel better. It's not going to help that person. In fact, it's going to make you feel worse. It's going to cause you to pull back even more or act out even more. There's no helpful purpose for that. What can be helpful is to check in with yourself and ask, what's going on? What do I need? Am I avoiding, or am I just needing space to breathe, to take care of myself, to have a bit of a break from all the craziness that's going on? And having compassion for that you need. Having compassion for maybe not reaching out as quickly as you might have wanted to. Not judging, but having compassion for the part of you that is feeling tired or doesn't know what to say, is exhausted. Because from that place, you're open. Your heart is open for yourself and for others. So really try to be mindful of that. Judgment versus self-compassion. Because we cannot do both at the same time. And self-compassion plays such an important role in not only how we feel, but ultimately how we are able to show up as our full and whole selves. Because if we're judging, we end up hiding. No more hiding. No more hiding. Yep, absolutely. Denial does not help at all in our adult lives. It does serve a purpose. It can be a really, really important and helpful coping mechanism when you don't have any control of your life. So even as an adult, I suppose, if you don't have any control over your life, denial can serve a purpose. It's not healthy, but it can still serve an important purpose. But in order to make any change, in order to feel fully whole, we can't be in denial. It's not possible. Those two things cannot be present at the same time. Checking in with yourself is another task when you're exhausted with fear and self-judgment. It can feel, I'm glad that you brought this up. It can feel like another thing to kind of check off of your list. But if you think of it as a necessity, if you think of it as something like sleep, you can experience it a little bit differently. So instead of, okay, I have all of these things to do, and the self-compassion or checking in with yourself feels like, okay, this is something I have to do because I'm supposed to, because I should feel better, or whatever. So it becomes like a should. It is going to feel like a task. It's going to feel more exhausting. It's going to create more self-criticism if you don't do it. But try to not put it on a list. Try to just kind of like breathing, like just the practice of being mindful of breathing. Because in a way, being mindful of breathing is also a way to check in with yourself. So if you think of it as, I'm trying to think of something else that we might look at as a practice, something that we don't have to like create space for specifically or whatever, but just becoming more mindful of breathing, I think, is the closest thing that I can think of right now anyway. So if you're practicing just being really mindful of taking some deep breaths every once in a while, like I have actually encouraged people to put like a reminder or a notification on their phone so that every hour they get a notification to breathe. Doesn't mean you have to do anything different. It's just, oh, make sure I'm breathing. And it really can be that simple. Checking in with yourself, there's depth, right? So there's a range of ways that you can check in with yourself. But I think as part of a practice, it can be just, it could be a reminder, check in, or it could be a reminder that comes up and says, how am I feeling? You don't have to create a lot of space for that. It's just a reminder to notice, because we are so disconnected. All of us, I think, as humans are quite disconnected, generally speaking, from ourselves, all parts of ourselves. We tend to be very future and past focused. We tend to, for a lot of different reasons, be very disconnected from anything that's happening internally. Like, have you ever noticed, and I've heard other people say this too, so I know it's not just me, you look in the mirror sometimes and you wonder who that is looking back at you, or you have to like take a moment and recognize that that person staring back at me is this person right here. Because we are so disconnected. We are so disconnected, generally speaking, from ourselves. And so the practice of connecting within can be something as simple as just, how does my body feel? What am I noticing in my body right now? And it can be pretty much that quick. Maybe just two snaps. But it doesn't have to be something that's long. It can be part of your regular practice. But I do get that when we sit with it, when we really practice, like what I walked you through at the beginning, that it does feel kind of like something to check off. And the reality is it can actually feel really uncomfortable. it can feel really uncomfortable. It can create more stress in a way, because when we're so used to being disconnected, when we begin to allow ourselves to connect to what's happening inside of us, especially if it's something that feels like a desire or a need, a fear or pain or something like that, it often is connecting us to something that we've tried to avoid. So it really can become a lot bigger. So for that, we do kind of need to make time for. We do need to recognize that that is something we have to create space for, and ultimately give ourselves the time and care that we need to be able to do that. And ideally that would, depending on what it is that's creating that difficulty for us, ideally we wouldn't be dealing with that on our own either. Because going back to the idea of processing or metabolizing, if we have somebody that we can talk to, and it doesn't have to be a therapist, but often a therapist is, for many people, the only person that they feel like they can really talk to about anything and not maybe be judged or not have to show up in the same way for the person that's listening to them. And that's not a selfish thing, but that is the reality. So there's different things. But anyway, if we have somebody that we believe gets it, they're safe, that we can talk to them about things, they're not going to judge us, they'll be able to listen. As we express that to somebody, and they can either be with us and hold it or reflect back to us that they're hearing us, then that is part of the metabolizing. That's the processing that is happening. And through that, it allows us to kind of release some of that that's going on. It can help dissipate some of that feeling and energy that is associated with it. So it really is, especially if it's really difficult stuff that's creating a lot of stress, or past stuff that was significantly wounding. We really do need to be able to talk about those things with somebody else, which is why connection is so important. But we can't truly feel connected if we don't feel pretty safe with somebody. So, and that brings up a whole lot of other things, but that is part of it. Yes. Yeah, Kristen, definitely. Not having control is definitely a struggle. Yeah, and there's very, very little in our lives right now that it feels like we can control. And that is hard. On one hand, it is also, again, if you have somebody that can support you in it, it can also be a good opportunity to practice working through the need to try to control. Because if there's a lot of things that you can't control, you kind of don't have a choice. And if you have the ability then to work through it, you can learn to find a place of feeling comfortable without having to control some of that. If, in your regular everyday life, if you have the ability to control a lot, then you don't necessarily have as much opportunity to practice feeling uncomfortable with not controlling. I hope that makes sense. But I think it is, especially at this time, I think that is something important to have somebody to help kind of work through that with. I think that's important. So the book by Radical Self-Compassion on Audible, I guess, is good. Or I don't know if there's another Audible type thing, but listening to the book. And that's an interesting thing as well. Listening versus reading. Now, For some people, one is always going to be better than the other for different reasons, just how we learn, how we take things in. But if we are able to listen, which I think is one of the reasons why people like watching videos, if we're able to listen, it actually can penetrate a little bit differently than reading. Now, of course, that's not true for everybody. I actually have a hard time listening to a book or a podcast or anything unless my eyes are closed and I'm able to stay connected to their voice. Otherwise, my mind is off somewhere else. And if my eyes are open, there's no way I can do it. Or at least not very easily. But when we can listen to something, we're feeling the energy of it. And I think that that's why it integrates a little bit differently. But learning styles can have an impact on that. So for some people, reading is going to be better than listening, but listening can definitely have an impact. When a thought makes me upset and I know I'm judging myself, I'm more easily able to calm myself. Yes. Good. So learning to say different things to yourself can help. And some things that are going to work better than others. And what works for one person may not work for somebody else. That's part of the reason it's all a practice, to learn and to be able to put those things into practice on a regular basis. Because the more you practice, the more helpful it is, the easier it gets. Like anything really in life, right? The more automatic it becomes. Good. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining me. Please make sure to practice lots of self-compassion and self-care over the next few days. And just be mindful of areas where you're struggling and try to reach out. Even if you're not talking about the things that are really weighing on you, but just connect. This is not a time to be isolating. So have a good weekend. I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Bye.